I hope that you have enjoyed the conference. I think it's coming to an end here. And today we're going to talk about this idea of growing and maintaining our world language programs. It is based on this book that we released probably a couple months ago called Give Them What They Want, a guide to increasing enrollment in world language classes, something that I think we are all interested in. And I'm going to kind of summarize this book and give some of my thoughts and opinions. You may agree with some of them, you may not, that's fine. I will tell you first that there is no magic secret button that makes our enrollment explode. There are some techniques and things that I believe help, but it is a challenge that we all face, and it's going to continue to be a challenge. So let's start with inspiration for this book, where this book came from, because if you've ever written something like this or shared a guide like this, it can be a little intimidating. Like, who am I? What do I have to say? What do I have to share with language teachers? But this is where it came from for me. I have taught upper level Spanish 3, 4, and AP level 5 for several years now. And without even really consciously thinking about it, I have been focused on enrollment because none of the classes that I teach are required. Actually, no language is required in our school or our state. Students can get it's one of the ways they can earn an honors diploma is by taking 3 years of the same language. So that pushes some kids into level 3. But other than that, there is nothing that requires them to be in the classes that I teach. So one of my goals over the years has been to increase enrollment, was to get students into those classes, because if they don't take those classes, I don't have a job, or at least I don't have the job that I love, which is teaching the upper level Spanish classes. And so for me, it's just, again, without even thinking about it, that's been a focus for years, getting students to take these classes. I deliberately stopped trying to persuade or convince students to continue. Years back, I decided I'm not going to push students to do things they don't want to do. I'm not going to tell them about all these benefits they could have in the future. I want students in these classes who want to be in these classes. And enrollment didn't decrease, it increased when I did that. The school that I teach at, I've been at for 10 years or so. When I started at that school, there were 12 students in level 4. There was no AP. Students were starting in 8th grade with Spanish, but if they took 4 years and then had another year of school, they were just done. There was no AP. There were 12 students in Spanish 4. Not long after that, after getting started with some of what I'm going to show you here, the enrollment increased. We are up to 45 to 60 kids in level 4. We have an AP program. I have 31 scheduled for next year. Anywhere between 20 to 35 we usually have in our AP program. So despite not trying to persuade or convince students to go on, the enrollment has increased. When we started the AP program, the principal at the time, I asked him about starting an AP program, and he said to me, we're not really an AP Spanish type school. We're a dual credit school. We're not really an AP Spanish school. Now, he wasn't being malicious. He was a principal that I loved working with, a lot of respect for. And honestly, he was right. We weren't really an AP Spanish type school, but he allowed us to do it. He allowed us to try it, and it has worked very well. So the book comes from this. How is that possible? How has our enrollment increased given all these situations? And there are some trends that I've noticed in school in general. The first here is beyond just language programs, but in our schools, and maybe you've seen this, there is an increase in dual enrollment, or dual credit, or college credit plus, we call it in Ohio. Students earning college credit for the classes they take while in high school, or post-secondary education where they're going to colleges and they're earning credit. And this pursuit of credit. And it's not necessarily a bad thing. I'm not being critical of those type of programs. Sometimes they work really well. And I think at the heart of it is a desire to serve students. We want to get them credit and help them get a jump on their college. And so that's at the heart of what's going on. But what is happening, what I think can be a problem is this pursuit of credit, this pursuit of benefit. And sometimes when we do that, when we pursue, we abandon quality education. We abandon quality classes. And honestly, sometimes we abandon quantity of classes. If a student is taking Spanish 1 and 2 and 3 and earning college credit for that, then they're missing out on the number of classes they could be taking in high school and college. And so sometimes this pursuit of credit is causing us to leave behind quality, good classes. Another trend I've noticed, and we've all noticed, is a decline in enrollment in world language classes, especially anything beyond what is required. And every school has different requirements. Every state has different requirements. It's always been the truth. It's always going to be the truth that as you go up in levels, the number of students who take the classes declines. But I think we're seeing even more and more of that, of students not taking those upper level classes for a lot of different reasons. And then the third trend I've noticed is a decrease in the priority status of world language classes. And this is an unfortunate truth, but it is the truth. We as language teachers, we are passionate about the languages that we teach. We see the value. We know there is such value in these classes. We know how important they are. And for us, they're the most important thing in the world. The truth is, we're never going to be at the same level as math, science, social studies, English. Those are always going to be a higher priority in our educational system. And we sometimes want to get so fired up about that, and we want to fight, and it's good to fight for those languages that we're passionate about. But sometimes we have to accept the fact that it's just different. Those classes are different from our classes. Now, it's okay. I think that's okay. I just think sometimes we need to recognize that there's a difference in priority, not for us, but sometimes for our systems. And so our response, the common response to a lot of these trends, is we try to persuade or convince students to continue studying languages. Not bad, not a bad idea. We want students to continue studying languages, but to persuade or convince them, what we're trying to do is we're trying to highlight the potential future benefits. We talk about college. You'll get into a better college. You'll get into college. You'll be accepted. You'll get into a better program. Your job will be better. Your job opportunities will be better if you continue taking these classes. We talk about transcripts and how much better they will look. We talk about resumes, how much better your resume will be if you take these classes. We try to highlight these external benefits. And we, as language teachers, try to play this credit game, which basically we're trying to do the same thing that the math and the science and the social studies programs are doing, and we're not the same priority. We're different. It's not a competition. We don't want to compete against those. We want those programs to succeed as well, but we can't keep up with them if what we're trying to do is play this credit game. We can't be the same as science, math, social studies, all those things. Now, none of this is bad. Students do receive future benefits. They can probably get into a college. They can probably get better jobs if they really continue in these languages. But I don't think that's the best way to persuade them to continue going on, because again, if they're only worried about credit and they're only worried about their resume, they're going to take math and science and social difficult, those things, because that's what they do. I think the argument of the book is that our approach needs to be a little different. The argument of the book is, what if instead of trying to persuade, instead of trying to convince, what if we establish undeniable momentum within our program by teaching dynamic classes that students want to be a part of? What if we stop worrying about benefits, persuasion, and we start focusing on good classes? What if we start worrying about teaching dynamic classes? What if we create environments where students want to be there? What if our class is a refreshing break from the norm? And again, this is not being critical of other classes, other programs, other subjects, but what if our class is just different? What if our class is refreshing? What if our class is enjoyable? What if students enjoy the experience so much that they cannot imagine their schedule next year without your world language class or a colleagues? Because I know sometimes we have students come from us to other students or to other teachers. They come from other teachers to us. We work in departments. What if students want to be in our language classes? In fact, they want to be there so much that they can't imagine their schedule without it. And that's what has happened. That's what's happening for me every year. My students, we get to like February when we get to scheduling classes for the next year. And my students tell me that they are fighting to keep Spanish in their schedule. And so we have counselors at our school that work with students, and they are wonderful, wonderful counselors. They do a great job, but they're very practical. And what they're looking at our students and their schedules, and they're working with our students, and they're saying this math class to get this credit, and you can get an associate's degree if you take these business classes and all these practical things that you should do for your future, which is great. That's awesome that our counselors are doing that. And my students are saying, yeah, but I want to be in Spanish class. And the counselors are saying, well, I don't know if that fits because you should do this and this and this. And my students are saying, no, I want to be in Spanish class. And so they're trying to move things around in their schedule. They're saying, hey, what if I don't eat lunch? Which is ridiculous. They need to eat lunch. And they're fighting to keep Spanish in their schedule. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Yeah, I have, sometimes you lose students. I have students. I just had a few students for next year who are wonderful, wonderful students who are involved in choir and theater and band, and it just doesn't fit. And that's a similar subject because they're very passionate about that as well. And you can't do it all. So sometimes we do lose students, but they're doing everything they can to be in these classes. Every year I have students in AP Spanish with low ACT scores who may not even go to college. And you say, well, why is that significant here? Because when you think about AP classes, when you think about an AP Spanish class, and you think about who is normally taking that class, it is normally what we consider normally would be students who are trying to gain credit to go to college. They're taking an AP class because they want to earn that AP credit in college. And I have some students who are like that, who are getting credit, and they're very successful, and they're going on to do great things in college. But I have other students who aren't even going to college, but they're still taking the class. Why would you take an AP Spanish class if you're not going to college? Because they like it, because they enjoy it, because they want to get better at Spanish, because they're doing everything they can to be there. Students who elect to take upper level Spanish classes rather than early dismissals or late arrivals. This just happened. The book came out, and then like a week or two later, I saw my schedule for this coming year. And I have 2 sections of AP next year. They are the next to last mod of the day and the last mod of the day, which is a rough time to teach AP because everybody's so exhausted, including me, by that time at the end of the day. And mostly seniors are taking AP. Our seniors at our school are allowed to leave early. They are allowed to take an early dismissal and leave school. So now I am competing not only against all these other classes that they could take, I'm competing against the idea of going home early. And I think I lost a couple because of it, which is sad. But by and large, most students would rather take the class than go home early. Same thing I've had at the first mod of the day. Students are allowed to arrive late. They would rather take the class than sleep in. And that, again, going back to priority, that's going to happen to us in our world language classes. We're not always the top priority. We're going to get those slots that maybe aren't the most desirable. We just have to create these experiences that students want to be a part of. Okay, so how do we do that? Much easier said than done, obviously, but how do we create these classes that students want to be a part of? If we believe that we're going to grow our departments, we're going to grow our programs by creating dynamic, quality, classes. How do we do that? In the book, there are 5 components that I describe of a class that students want to be a part of. And obviously, this will just be a summary. The first one is classroom culture. There's a lot in this book about classroom culture. If students are part of a strong classroom culture, want to come out and want to sign up for more of those classes. So we need to be deliberate about establishing a strong classroom culture. There are these, I go into detail of these parts of a classroom culture within the book. Very quickly, let me just mention them. The first one is that students step into a new world when they enter our classes. Our classes are world language classes. They are very different than anything else that they're taking. They sound different. They look different. They smell different sometimes. Our classes are a new world, and new worlds are exciting. And we need to be deliberate about creating this new world. Number 2, students are not intimidated or afraid to make mistakes. A new language is scary. It is intimidating by nature. We need to be deliberate about reducing. It's probably impossible to eliminate intimidation, but we can reduce it. And there are things we can do to reduce that fear of making mistakes and reduce that intimidation, because intimidation is the enemy and we need to reduce it. 3, students are accepted, valued, supported, and empowered. Our students belong in our classes. When you enter a class, when you enter a new world and you are accepted and you are valued, validated, and you are supported and you feel power, you want to come back. You want to be a part of that next year. And so there are a lot of techniques for making our students feel accepted. 4, students expect to hear the target language at least 90% of the time. Target language use is super important in class. It's super important to growing. It's actually what students want to be a part of. They want to be a part of a place where that language is being used. 5, students are engaged for the entire class time. We are using Spanish every minute of every day. That establishes a culture. 6, students are connected to the global community. The target language is spoken. For some students, this is naturally their desire. They want to know about these cultures and these peoples where our languages are spoken. For others, they have no idea that that's even part of it. And so, but they learn to love it. And so connecting to the communities where our languages are spoken is a pillar of a strong classroom culture. Number 7, students understand that everything has a purpose. When they believe that everything you do is making them better, everything has a purpose, they feel like it's not a waste of time to be in our classes and they want to continue to be there. I think in the book, there's actually a number 8 that is students believe that their teacher is passionate, that we are passionate. When we are passionate, our culture improves. The second component is a classroom community. I think classroom culture is something that a lot of teachers in any subject understand is important, and we're constantly working to establish a strong classroom culture. Community is something that sometimes is forgotten. There are a lot of wonderful, great teachers who work very hard at establishing community, and it is very important. Classroom community is important. Well, what's the difference between culture and community? A community shares and responds and supports. Our students want to contribute to a strong community. Again, this is what makes us different. This is one of the incredible opportunities we have as language teachers, is that we can share with each other, we can respond, we can support each other, and it fits within our curriculum. It's probably difficult to establish community in a math class or a science class. We have incredible opportunities to create community. So let's do that, because that makes an atmosphere where students want to come back. A community validates its members. Again, our students belong in our classes and they need to know it and believe it. A strong classroom culture reminds us that our interests, beliefs, and opinions matter and we belong in the class. The difference is a community, a strong sense of classroom community reminds us that the interests, beliefs, opinions, and needs of our classmates matter as well. And when classes become communities, it's just a wonderful thing to watch. And when they start to consider the needs and the opinions and the beliefs of classmates, it's a wonderful thing to watch. The thing about classroom community is we do not, as teachers, we don't have control of it. The classroom community that forms in any classroom is a result of the students. The students have the most power and the most control in forming a community. And that can be a little scary for us, but it's actually an empowering thing to see how communities are formed within classes. Now, there are things that we can do as teachers to help, to push, to try to establish and lead our students towards building a strong community. We teach languages. Languages are used to communicate, share, express, and support. So let's use them to do that and to build communities. The third component that in the book of a good quality class that students want to come back to is communication. Students take our languages because they want to communicate. They want to use the language. We know that that doesn't always happen. That's not always the emphasis of a language class. I don't know if you've heard, I've heard recently these commercials on the radio. I think it's Babbel. It might be like Duolingo or Babbel. And I've heard these commercials. I get a little fired up. So these Babbel commercials, they'll say, they're talking about this app or this program that you could buy to learn a new language. And they'll say, with Babbel, we focus on communication. And within a few lessons, you'll communicate. Within a few weeks, you can have real conversations. It's not like your high school language class where you didn't communicate. You just spent time on drills and homework and tasks and assignments. It's not like that. We focus on communication. And I hear those radio commercials and I get like, I have to actually like change the channel or turn it down because I get so fired up. And I'm not mad at Babbel because they're not wrong. They're right. What they're doing is communication, and that is what people want. And unfortunately, that is not what happens in all classes. And so I get upset and I'm yelling at the radio, no, that's what we do in my class. We communicate. Those are other classes that don't communicate. And I get all fired up because that is still the perception of language classes, is that we're focusing on drills and learning, and we're not focusing on communication. Unfortunately, it's true sometimes. But that also demonstrates what students of any age want when they learn a language. They want to communicate. People are paying money. People that have graduated are paying money for these apps and these programs to communicate, to really communicate. Our students can do it for free in our classes if we're teaching communicate, if we're using communication in our classes. So students want to communicate. I believe that students' ability to communicate grows as a result of input. I teach with comprehensible input. The communication section of this book is really a description of how I see it. There are 12 pillars of CI. Each one is described within the book. So if you're new to CI, there's a lot in there to get you started. If you've been using CI, there's probably a lot of valuable things in there that you could compare to what you do. There's a lot of detail of them in the book. Very quickly, the pillars I think of CI are a reduction in quantity of language, a focus on high frequency, an unwavering commitment to using our target language, an emphasis on listening and reading, an emphasis on language use and not just recognition, a reduction in student work, an emphasis on personalization, a constant search for compelling materials, a variety of activities with the same purpose, which is providing input, a variety of ways we provide input, an awareness of processing abilities, an emphasis on experience, and an emphasis on proficiency-based assessments. So there's a description of all those things in the book. But basically, if we are creating classes where students are communicating and they feel like their ability to communicate is growing and is increasing, then they want to come back because that's what they want to do. They want to communicate. A few weeks ago, we were at the CI Summit, and I did a language lab for some upper level students. And in that lab, I think it was on Friday actually, I think I got this question a few times, but on Friday, someone asked this very, very good question. And it's a question that comes up a lot. Does CI teaching work in an AP language program? And the reason we get that question a lot is because there are a lot of AP upper level language teachers who are very critical of CI. And so this question comes up. Does CI teaching work in an AP language program? If you were there, you might remember what my response was very strongly. In my case, my AP language program would not exist without CI, because my AP language, my AP class, my level 4 class, those are all elective classes. If I did not focus on communication, if I did not use CI to establish this atmosphere, this environment where communication is most important, students wouldn't want to be a part of it. And if students didn't want to be a part of it, they wouldn't take the classes, and this AP program would not exist. So my answer to that question is absolutely yes. CI teaching does work in an AP language program. The fourth part of the book is class components, a description of some of the things that we do in class. Students want to be in a class where they know everything they do has a purpose, everything is valuable, there's no wasted time, there's no busy work, there's nothing that they're doing that doesn't guide them to their goals of becoming better language users. And so basically what we do in class, most of what we do is an attempt to provide input. So there are descriptions here of, some of the things that we do in class: music, jokes, conversations, trivia questions, storytelling, reading, movie talk, cultural explorations, games, assessment. All of those things, most of those things are an attempt to provide input, and there are some descriptions of how we do those things. A lot of them are enjoyable, things that students like doing. Music is fun, games are fun, jokes are funny. Even the things that are not so enjoyable, like sometimes we have to write, sometimes they don't love reading, they still believe that those things serve a purpose. I had a parent-teacher conference a few years ago, and it was one where the student came in with her mom. The student and her mom came in, and we're talking, as you do in conferences, about all the things. And the girl said to her mom, she said, "Mom, this class is great. We just do a bunch of fun things, and then I'm better at Spanish." And we kind of laughed, and I laughed because like that's not necessarily how I would describe like all that goes into planning all these lessons and everything that I'm worried about happening. But I thought about it for a second, and she was right. Like that, for her, that was what was happening. She was just participating in everything going on in class. She was enjoying the music and the games and the relevant conversations and the trivia and the silly stories and the cultural explanations that weren't silly but were very relevant. She was just doing all these things and enjoying the experience, and then she was better at Spanish. And so students want to be a part of a class where they believe that everything they're doing is leading them towards their goals of communicating. The fifth part of the book is candy, which is just, candy, stickers. We give our kids things. Basically, we have fun. We have fun in our classes. We want to be a part of those classes. So that is a very quick summary of the book. Thank you so much for your attention. I'm going to share these slides with Voces, and then they will make them available to you. At the last page here is a video, which is also kind of like a trailer ad summary for the book. I'm not going to show it to you now because it's a lot of what I just talked about. But if you're interested in seeing more about that, that video is a part of these slides. I don't know if we maybe have some time for questions. There is that survey. If there's a question you don't want to ask right now or something that comes up, you can put it in that survey and I will look at it. I'm not available. We'll get back to you with answers if you have something specific or something that comes up that you want to ask. This is my website. You can contact me through there if anything ever comes up. I have Spanish readers for sale. There's some videos and things on there as well. I love to help out if there's anything you need. And let me actually stop sharing here. And what do we got?
Great job, Bryan.
Thank you. I don't know if we want to do questions now or if we want to just It's up to
We
you.
have time for questions if you have a few minutes. I know
Sure.
you have limited time too, but maybe like 10 minutes.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I
Um,
know this is kind of a different kind of topic. I don't know what, maybe we don't have a lot of questions, but I would be glad to try.
Meredith in chat asks, how do you do your trivia questions?
Okay. So trivia questions, I do once a week. And by the way, it's described in the book, but I do once a week. And I ask the same question to all 6 or 7 of my classes. They collectively come up with an answer. And then the next day we look at the answer, and whichever class got it right or closest to right gets a point. We keep track of those points throughout the entire year. At the end of the year, the class with the most points gets a pizza party. Trivia is a great way it's another way to get input in, because we're always reading or listening something. It's a great way to incorporate culture into the classroom, because almost all the questions are based on countries where Spanish is spoken. Any other questions? I can open up the chat as well.
There's one that just went into the chat. One question or brainstorm is if anyone has ideas to connect with the community, local or global, do you have ideas to get students speaking with community members through conversation circles or volunteering with Spanish speakers, anything like that? Presenters in the classroom? I will say, like, randomly, that we do work a lot with Boomerang, and they are a company that provides like real time conversations with native speakers. I'll put a link in the chat. Boomerang, they were at CI Summit.
Awesome. Yeah, just in general, those are all wonderful ideas. Like conversation with Spanish speakers, volunteering in the community, having presenters come in. Those are all, that's part of what students want to communicate, and they want to be part of those cultures. Those are all wonderful ideas.
Someone asked, what do you mean by candy?
What I mean by candy basically is that I have candy, and I have stickers, and I have little rewards. Basically, don't be afraid to be silly and have like silly rewards for students. Even like I have seniors, I have high achieving high school seniors, and they love candy, and they love stickers, and they love rewards, and you're never too old or too cool for those type of things.
I will say, Brian, that lots of the comments in the chat when you were talking were like basically just people saying like, oh, I experienced this too, or like, this is what I see in my students, or, like I just think you pointed out some like really important truths and observations that it's so healthy for all of us to hear, so that we know that we're not the only ones experiencing it. So
yeah. And I do understand too, like I really believe strongly in this, that if we want to grow our programs, we need to focus on high quality classes. But it's still a challenge. Like I said at the beginning, it's not a magic button that just makes everything easy. It's always going to be a challenge. I just saw, have you seen a difference in scores with CI versus traditional approach? I don't have, like I was doing CI before I started AP. There was no AP before I started with that. So I don't have those numbers to compare as far as AP scores. What I've seen, I mean, is enrollment be very good. And I've seen pretty good scores. I just don't have the traditional to compare it with.
any other questions?
Can I ask another question?
Absolutely.
Okay, so Brian, I read your book cover to cover and loved it. And I just really interested in trying your methods this year with my students. But my question is just a logistics. So like I teach middle school, and we start the class with bell work or bell ringer. And it's just like a time when I take roll and, just kind of do all that housekeeping stuff. But in your book, you mentioned that you start with like, how are you and all that stuff. So do you just get right into it, or how do you manage that kind of in the beginning of class when you're trying to, build relationships and do the conversation piece? Thanks.
Okay, well, I'll say first of all that I often forget to take attendance, so I don't know that my way is better. But Yes, I do jump right into it. I do music most days as the first, and that sometimes gives me that time to do the bell, the attendance and stuff like that take roll. But I start with music sometimes, and then yes, I do jump right into it. I have 40-minute classes, which are very short and very fast. So I have to jump into things right away. If you have more time, bell work is a great time to do that kind of stuff too. So I don't know if that answers your question, but yeah, music, and then jump right into those questions. Someone asked, what about AP test prep? Yes, we have to do AP test prep. It's not fun always. The thing about the AP class itself is when you have a CI program and through the years, and by the way, my students aren't all coming from CI in levels 1 and 2. We have different teachers there, and that's fine. But I know they're getting CI 3, 4. When they're focused on communication as they come up and they get to AP, a lot of times just teaching the AP class the way it's designed is very CI because it's about communication. AP is based on being able to communicate. AP is based on skills. And so we're doing things in Spanish all the time. You know, we're listening to audios, we're writing essays and comparison. We're doing cultural comparisons. Those things fit with what we've been doing in the other years. They're just a little more advanced. So yes, we do have to do that AP test prep, but it's not that different than anything else we normally do. Now, I will say this as far as AP test prep, the first few years I taught AP, I did a ton of test prep, and it was a bit difficult and painful for all of us. And I realized that you know, you want the class to be something that is valuable, and so we can't be doing that much prep all the time. So I've reduced the amount of specific AP test prep that I've done every year, and the results have still been as strong as they were.
All right, I'm going to jump in real quick with one from chat. Administrative buy-in. How do you get the administration to kind of agree with this attitude toward creating the class community, having the quality of class, and proving that it's more beneficial academically?
Yep, good. When your enrollment, when it's undeniable how much your enrollment is growing, the administrators buy in. When they see that, like, they can't deny that what you're doing is working. When they visit your classroom and see students engaged anytime they walk in, I've had a lot of administrators' kids in class, and when they tell their parents about how much they're growing and how well Spanish class is going, the administrators buy in pretty quickly. So we did have dual enrollment in Spanish 4 years ago, and I had us drop it, get rid of it. And that nothing against dual enrollment. That can be great. It just didn't fit. The university we were working with, they wanted us to do exactly what they were doing, which makes sense. And it didn't fit with where we were going with the AP. So just in our specific situation, it didn't really work. And I asked us to drop it. And they were a little curious at first about why we might do that. But once they saw our enrollment kept going, they saw students were taking AP, doing well in AP, they were on board. Yeah, so if you can build momentum in your program, in your classes, usually your administrators are going to be on board, especially because we are a different type of class, because we're not necessarily a state tested class. We have sometimes a little more freedom to try those things out. And then if the momentum is undeniable, they'll be on board. So
Karen asked to follow up. Until you have that momentum, what do you do?
I don't know, maybe you wait until you have that momentum before you make changes like that.
Yeah, I would think if you've got,
it happened pretty quickly.
If you've got lower levels and you've got that enrollment increasing there, then it would carry on through the higher levels to convince them to add those higher level programs if they don't already have them.